Yeah, how's it going, Mike?
Wonderful, friend.
Right on.
How we doing?
Doing good. How was your week?
It was good. It was
Right
interesting, fun.
All right. It's always interesting and fun, right?
Absolutely.
Even when it's not.
That's the fun part.
Yeah.
What are we getting into today?
We'll find out.
Cool.
Yeah. So.
Welcome.
Welcome. Another transmission of Perspective Shift. I'm Frank.
I'm Mike.
There you go. We're gonna try to shift your perspective. If we can't, we're gonna shift ours.
Yep.
How about that?
Let's do it.
Yeah, so, I don't know, let's, the subject, lately I've been watching a lot of interviews with certain people that have these methods, modalities, to help people get beyond their limited beliefs or move into a broader belief. And I want to touch on it a little bit, because even from the understanding of modality, it's still a permission slip, or another way of saying placebo. But when I say that, I don't mean to denigrate it or make it to where we don't need to utilize it. Because without a modality or a permission slip or a placebo, there'll be nothing for the consciousness to focus on, to take the attention towards something. So it's needed. So when I say it's a placebo or permission slip, I'm not making light of it. I'm not taking the responsibility away from it. But it's the experience that we have into it that allows us to be conscious. But it's not empirically why something happens. This is why there's always going to be a new method to have. And lately I've been watching a lot of people that what I find really nice about it is they come up with these different methods and modalities to get people to, whether it's out of disease or sickness or mental struggles or even, suffering. Yeah, exactly. And what I've noticed, what I like about it is, it's not that like, oh, the world doesn't need another one, but what the thing is, it's you can tell their intention is being put out there with love, not to make money, because what I've noticed is that they're not only showing you how to do it, they're also teaching people how to be practitioners of it. And they realize even when they do it or another practitioner does it, the results come out just as magnificent. So they're not just saying that I hold the power within this field of this modality, so you must come see me. If anyone else you see will be diverted or defeated from the moment in which we're in. They don't do that anymore. There was a point in time when people would come up with stuff and it sounded really good. It was sound because it distracted you. Or actually, it didn't distract you. It actually made you conscious. Because when you're doing something new, whether it's a new diet or a new way of thinking, you have to get out of the subconscious mind and into the conscious mind because you've never done it before. So you become present and conscious following along. And that is the real causation of it. But something new is what enables us to do that. Otherwise, we fall back into the habitual mind and keep reiterating what it is we do. We sound like a broken record after a while. So, but what I've noticed in all these people I'm watching, and over the last week or so, I've been drawn to watch these different interviews with these different people that had different modalities, all ranging to helping out, whether it's psychological, physical, illness, all this stuff, which will just help elevate human beings, especially in a time right now with this COVID and this diversity between the political arena. It's really having people psychologically and physically at odds, when these are the perfect time when these modalities can happen. And what's beautiful about it, as time goes on, these modalities become more simpler and easier. Like one was just about breathing in and breathing out. You don't really need to go to find your way to Mount Kilimanjaro to do it, or to pay $5,000 to be at a seminar. And I'm not knocking any of those other options, but as we rise higher, we actually understand empirically who we really are. At the core is we're pure positive energy. And the one quality that energy has, it will always and forever move in the path of least resistance. So that's why when you mull over these modalities, whatever one strikes you, ignites you, do it. Don't look for one better at that time, just do it. Because when I look at them, like I get jazzed up about the modality that people are out there trying to help other people. And what's funny is it will take me to the next level without actually going to the functionality of the modality. But it's my excitement because I could tell they really care about other human beings and they want to lift them out of it. And because me and Mike are here to explain about the understanding of the empirical laws that govern this universe, but we're not trying to talk you out of it. You don't need that modality. No, we came here in the three-dimensional world to experience it.
All of them.
So what would consciousness be without a focus of experience, right? Like what would water be without a thirsty mouth, right? What would oxygen be without the inhalation of the nose? We're in this duality world, so consciousness needs a focal point in order to have the experience. Otherwise, nothing's done. So these modalities, these permission slips, these placebos are illusionary, but the experience we have through them is the reality in which we're looking for. So by all means do it. We're not knocking it. I praise these people doing it because you can tell they're coming from love and they want to do it. And what happens, oh, I never saw that before. I never considered that before. In that moment, it makes the individual that strikes it, it makes them consciousness. And then their focus onto something is, the focused conscious effort is the empirical reason that thing happens. But then do it. Do it for the experience. Like I said before, I meditate to meditate. But what I notice after I meditate, there are things that happen where I feel more alive, I feel awake, or I have better ideas, or a book comes to me, or an idea that comes to me to have a podcast, or whatever transpires. And then I respond and act towards it, move towards that. But I didn't sit and meditate saying, I want to meditate so I have a better workout today. Because I defer my meditation to a stepping stone. It's just a means to an end. No, the meditation onto itself is the experience. And every experience will have a birth to something new that you didn't see coming. And that's the beauty of life.
I think you really touched on the key of how we experience things as human beings and what we allow to unconsciously record and usually appear and fuel our day, if you will. That's that rhythm that we get stuck in, that we cling to because it's comfortable, we recognize it, etc. These modalities are taking us out of that norm and I don't want to say forcing, but allowing us to truly focus and be present, which is ultimately what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So like through these different modalities, and I love how you brought up anything can be treated as modality. You bring up diet, and I love that because people think, oh, if I eat A, B, C, and D and work out this many times, then this will happen. And it's like, it's a permission slip. It is.
It is, but that's why a new diet works. But once you get into the rhythmic aspect of it, and what I mean is once you put it into your program aspect,
the unconscious
aspect, it becomes a habit. And then what happens when something becomes a habit, it no longer requires the conscious mind, and so the effect in which you were looking for starts to diminish.
Mm-hmm.
And then you move on, and then people are like, where is the perfect thing? And I'm like, well, if you can remain conscious all the time, a modality would not necessarily be needed.
Mm-mm.
You know, you would just have experience, so we wouldn't call it a modality.
But you also just touched on this. We can't have that because we live in a duality.
Yes.
That concept.
Consciousness needs something to focus on.
Exactly. You throw a ball, you need something to push back on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That concept of the positive, negative, the yin, the yang. Instead of seeing that feeling as a shadow, dark, or non-preferential type of event, walk into it.
Yeah, and that's just it. Because there's sometimes like I'll go into a meditation and I walked into meditation and I looked at that as a modality, But for me, I just look at it now as the experience, not what I'm going to get from it. Where years ago I did, now I no longer look for something, but something always shows up. But I go in for the experience. But there are moments where I'm like, maybe drive my car, and I'm at a traffic light and it's traffic, so even if the red light turned green, I don't have to rush. And all of a sudden, I'll just be staring at something, and all of a sudden, 30 seconds, a minute went by. I left the planet. I wasn't planning on it, but yet a download of information, ideas came to me. But I can't show up at the light the next day, hopefully it turns red, for that to happen. And that's the beauty of it. But what it is I've learned to stay open and permeate this feeling. Like when I start to feel anxiety or I feel bad, I just accept it and let go of it. So I'm becoming more astute and more in tune to how I feel. And this is when all these surprises, because if I was in angst all the time, people would be cutting me off. I would notice that. And I would get lost in that. And I could get lost in a minute for that. And a story could go on my head. The difference is that energy field isn't in cooperation in my preferential direction. And that I do notice. But when I'm in a good feeling place and I get distracted by a bird, and next thing I know I see the bird, and next thing I know the light was green, it's like, wow. But I can't even call that a modality. I just slipped into something. And that's what it is when we focus on these modalities, do it for the experience, but you'll slip into something, and when you come out, you're a whole different person.
And this is what musicians will find, this is what dancers will find, singers,
even accountants.
It's yeah, absolutely. When they get
during
lost
tax
in
day.
the flow of tax
Yeah.
season. But what we're talking about
really
is flow.
Yeah.
Focus is flow. Presence is flow.
Yeah.
You know flow when you're in it.
Yeah, and flow is a natural rhythm of the universe. And
It's the path of least resistance.
Yeah, exactly. And in the physical three-dimensional world, and one of time as you know it, to tell the linear perspective story of it, it's one of physicality. So focusing on a physical object, or breathing, which is a feeling, or focusing on a sound, is a physical three-dimensional thing that we're experiencing. Yet the consciousness is the awareness of it. But without the sound, there is no experience. Without the taste, there's no experience. Without the contrast, there's no experience. So we came here to have experience. But when we do it in a state of consciousness, and then we slip into this place, it's brilliant.
And see, there's a lot of layers to this, because like years ago, when I'm a musician, I played in a band. When I would tour and when I'd be playing on stage, I would get lost in this sense of flow. Did I know what it was? No. Did I know it was right and it felt good? Yes. Could I feel it amongst my band members on stage? Hell yes. That layer, although I wasn't able to know what it was at the time, I can look back, and see different points in my life where I was in flow. So when you become attuned or in tune with these concepts that we're discussing, you look at your whole world differently. Yeah. You start seeing your past differently. You start seeing movies differently, television show. Everything appears different when you slip into this conscious awareness that we're describing.
Yeah. And we've always had it. It's just the conscious awareness of a child in grade school upon first day of summer and not even conceiving when summer was going to end, it just would never end for them, is the state we're talking about. There was nothing pulling at them. There was nothing they just knew school was over. And for all they knew, it was over forever. Because summer was forever. Mm-hmm. And we now, at this old age, people are like, oh, well, this is how things are. I'm like, no, things are how you say they are. Getting back into this childlike state, into this conscious focus on something, and not worrying about what if, because the kid doesn't say, what happens if it rains today? If it rains, they ride their bike through the mud puddle. Mom and Dad might not like that, but you know, they're not asking permission. They're just going through it. You know, their higher self said, "Hey, that looks like fun. Let's do it." You know, and that's what we're drawn to. But then we somehow coax out of it. All right. Now, I don't know if that's good or bad.
But we're coaxed out of that through the projections of others, through family members.
Yeah.
Our personal projection of how what we believe life
Trying
should
to fit
be.
in with the
with
status
the norm.
quo.
Yeah. So look at those as the projections of not only yourself but of others.
Yeah.
Which is yourself, but we'll get to that later.
And even as I further examine it, do I know that was wrong and shouldn't have been done? And the answer is no, because you know what makes a fire in a fireplace so comfortable is the winter blizzard that you just came from.
Duality.
So the contrast of starting out this world in this woohoo, and then people like, you gotta get a job and go to school. What? You know, all of a sudden, that's part of the contrast. So people are like, how do I get to a position where I can raise my kids and I don't have to go through everywhere? I'm like, but aren't you seemingly experiencing joy and sadness and all this other stuff? It's all good. Yeah. Why do you want to take that away? It's better to explain that we are adaptable. You'll be okay. But the unknown is why we came here. And in the unknown, there's a slight sense of uncomfortableness. But you can get comfortable with going into the uncomfortable, and that's what we're talking about. And what's interesting is some of these modalities that I'm talking about, permission slips to help people with their immune system, depression, or whatever it is, it's placing yourself in uncomfortable positions. Like there's this one person, this guy named Wim Hof. I've been hearing about for years and stuff like that, and just recently I saw a couple of interviews with him, more getting into it. But he's big into ice water and breathing. And so even the breathing techniques he's doing is rather uncomfortable. But because I have to do it, I have to be focused. And when I become discomfortable, I actually get something out of it. So then I seek it out and I take it to another level. Same thing with cold water. You go into the cold water. It's the discomfort that creates the consciousness of awareness of what's going on. And it really is, because then you can take it from that and, you know, now you're used to the cold, I can take the discomfort and go into the hot. But we're trying to find a slot where we're comfortable and stay there. I'm like, no, the most comfortable couch after several hours will create bed sores. We have to, in life is about knowing, I'm just getting comfortable, get up and move. And then, I'm getting tired, rest. Boom. It's this dance. And when we stay conscious, we know just when to eat and when to put the fork down. We know just how much to drink and when to put it down. But when we're not, we drink too much, we drink too little, we eat too much, we eat the wrong thing. So this flow is a state of balance in which Mike was talking about. It lets us know in a spontaneous moment. So if someone says like, well, how many things do you do when you work out? I'm like, it's not how many I do. It's how I feel. And when I get into the feeling, something will say, put it down. And I'll put it down. Something says, pick it up. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. It's because I'm not looking for the feeling from the 10 reps. I'm already in the state and I end up doing 10 or 20 or maybe 6. I get into the state, then I get into the experience. So what we're learning and teaching now in the empirical sense, consciousness first, then focus on the thing. It's literally putting the horse in front of the carriage. But if you're looking for something to find consciousness, you're in an unconscious state. You're not present.
That's you looking for the answer in the outside world, when the answer can only and always be found within.
Yeah. And that's the one thing. I was listening to an interview. He was being interviewed with Joe Rogan. And I didn't finish the interview, but it's almost over. Towards the end of the interview, what I found interesting is, he was talking about, he saw a picture of him and this Wim Hof guy sitting in a yoga lotus position on ice, and you can look around and like the place is all frozen, and Joe Rogan's like, how are you not getting frostbite? And he talks about, regulating your body. We have the ability to do it. He's doing it in this formality or modality is breathing. There's other ways to do it, but this is a way to do it. And we know we all have an agreement on functionality of oxygen. There's not a human being that can't live without oxygen. So that becomes an innate agreement onto the human physiology. Even though we live in this illusionary world, gravity and oxygen and water and substance are needed. Agreement. Collectively, so they're like, so you agree to it. So because you agree to it, it's like it's part of your DNA structure in order to maintain the survival of this planet. So it's an agreement in this experience. So he goes and explains that you could be able to regulate your body to whatever. And then that's when Joe Rogan, after like 2 hours interview, says, so what he's saying is control your body, hence the way you feel, when the outside world comes to you. But most people are trying to create the climate in order to accommodate their body. But we were meant to actually have our body be accommodated for the outside world. We are to change inward and allow the out world to do its thing, not the other way around. So if I'm trying to change the outside world to feel comfortable, it's not going to go work. It will never work.
We must adapt to the outside world. And
that becomes the experience. It's like going to an amusement park and telling people that you've never been to an amusement park and like telling them what kind of rides you want. Well, the only ride you know is a swing. But when you get there, like, what the hell is that? Oh, it's called a roller coaster. Oh my God! So then you take a couple of breaths, you get on the thing and you do it. But if you've never seen a roller coaster, would you ever anticipate a roller coaster? No, you wouldn't have. Because where did the inspiration for roller coaster come from? Probably some guy looked at a mountain, saw a ridge line, and probably saw something flying. Who knows? I'm sure I can find out. But what it is we entered into this world to be inwardly adaptive to the outer. And then what happens is you realize you create the outer with the inward. But when we're trying to move around the outward to accommodate the comfortableness, you almost take a car and you plant it in front of your house as a statue. Like, it wasn't meant to be stagnant, it was meant to drive. That's how we are. And this is where depression comes in, anxiety,
alcoholism, drug abuse,
everything.
Name it.
Yeah. Because it in those momentary times of the satisfaction of the alcohol or the food, it distracts us from the innate ability to what we do. We want to step into the unknown, the uncomfortable. That's why we came here. And when you do it, it's like, that was great, right? It was a great experience. And all of a sudden you start jonesing for that. And all of a sudden you start permeate higher and the energy fields higher and you start experiencing the world in the literal term and the way we're supposed to experience it out of joy and excitement and the unknown by taking fear out of it. What is fear? Fear is a belief saying I can't do it and you're on the precipice of doing it. That's it. Now again, fear is there to protect you. If you think you're going to have a heart attack when you jump into the ice water, I suggest you don't do it until you overcome that belief. And then you're like, oh, why do I believe that? And so once I expand the belief and it lets me get in the water and I have the experience and I get out, well, I didn't have a heart attack. Well, guess what? That belief no longer, it's not that it no longer exists. It no longer is warranted for your structure because you actually experienced the cold water without the heart attack. So now you know. In a state of knowing, belief isn't needed. Belief is needed to move beyond the next step of the knowing.
Jesus knew he could walk on water.
Yes, exactly.
He didn't need to believe it.
And then he convinced Peter, and then once he was realizing what he's doing, his old belief structure came in and he sunk. This is what we're talking about. Regulating. yes, you're going to sometimes fall back into the old belief even if you did it. Like, oh, I did it a week ago, I don't know if I could do it again. Again, you did it once, you do it again. Again, don't jump in until you make that old belief malleable, add a couple more doors in it, other exits, other entrances, and then you go into it. And what happens when you do it, you expand the belief. You don't actually really expand the belief. You completely transform the belief. It is a completely different belief altogether. The other belief, someplace exists, but you transformed it. It's like energy. Energy never disappears.
Cannot be created or destroyed.
But yet you can transform it into physical objects and into non-physical, right? Ice, water, steam. Same molecular structure, well, same substance, but based on the different pressures and heats and volumes, it changes. All you did is transform it due to the frequency setting, whether it was ice cold, freezing, another frequency setting of room temperature as we call it, another one of 212 or above, where it turns into steam and starts boiling away. And the transformer is just energy. So you can take any energy and make it colder, luke, or boiling. And when you do that, the physical world gives you a different result. We are the transformer. We are the energy, and at the same time, we're also physical matter. So we can actually change any ailment because we created the ailment. How did the ailment come? Through disease. What is disease? You were at dis-ease. You weren't at ease. You were at tenseness or whatever. And the body was meant to flow and let go.
When you restrict energy and you contort it and your body's here and there, it's just trying to move. It's trying to get out. And what does that surface? It surfaces in the form of disease. It surfaces in the form of crisis in the exterior, in your third dimensional world. Yeah, and
we're not perfect, or we are perfect. It's not how you look at it. But part of it is getting into a diseased place to get into ease.
I'm a firm believer that, like, without crisis, I don't know if I would have found through great suffering is how I was able to come to realize there's more to this.
That's a truth, but that's not necessarily an empirical truth, but it is a truth. It is a truth. I would never say that's not true.
No.
But empirically,
I see what you're right. I see exactly what you're saying.
Because empirically,
you don't need to go through suffering in order to become conscious. You don't.
No, you don't. But yet, it seems like a useful tool on this planet. We understand it.
I think it's, Eckhart Tolle says it well, some people, man, they just get so sick of it, of the suffering, that they have to come to.
Yeah, what Eckhart Tolle said, which I was very interesting, he goes,
I love that.
Suffering is a useful tool until you need it no longer.
Yeah.
Because
once you realize that you're in control, you're the one holding your head below water, you go, wait a second, hold on.
Yeah, it's your hand.
It's my hand holding me underwater. It's not
Yeah, exactly. But yet, as far as I know, most people that came into these extraordinary findings had a story behind it, one of suffering or despair. So that's where we get it from. But it doesn't mean it's like, okay, I want to get enlightened, so I'm going to jump off a building. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. You don't willingly do that, because that it's onto itself is a misunderstanding of it. No one ever asked for the thing in which they found themselves in. When they look back, they might have had an onset of thoughts that led them down that path. So it wasn't like, how did I end up here? Because when you come to an understanding, it's like, oh, I ended up here because I focused on it. But when I actually fell in the mud, worst case scenario, so to speak, I realized I can get out and hose myself off. So now I'm no longer scared of the mud, but yet I recognize mud and I no longer have to fall into it, so I can go over that. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It was being scared of the mud that drew me to the mud to fall in. And now my worst fear came true, and oh wow, I'm still here.
I'm just fine.
Yeah.
Crazy how that works.
It is. And who knew? My skin is smoother.
Seriously. Yeah.
Now I opened up mud baths around town.
Seriously.
My mom once yelled at me, "Yeah, goddamn mud!" Now I'm making a living at it. It's like, who knew, right? Who knew?
But it's cool how you say that, because that is true. And again, me saying that that's just a story, guys. That's a story I wrote about me assigning all this as my experience. We're the best storytellers on the planet. That's what we do. So what story are you gonna tell? You know, recognize it for what it is. Write a good one, please, because you're choosing to write one that is non-preferential and one that's scary.
Yeah, one that you wouldn't have your best friend read. It's like, come on,
but when you realize that you're writing that story
before it happens,
before it even happens,
before you write it,
and a big thing, guys, recognize that the head chatter is not you. You are not the chatter in your head. That was a big thing for me. That was a tipping point when I could separate separate myself from the subconscious brain patterns that I had implanted over a multitude of experiences from birth to now.
Yeah, but even those are part of the contrastal aspect. So it's
Absolutely.
not even, so it's not even like, oh, I wish this never happened.
No.
Like, no, it's like yeah. So
because when it clicks, you don't care because you understand.
It was part of the journey.
Yeah.
And then you actually accept it, because the acceptance is one of the most powerful things that we have. So in a moment of, like, if you're in a state of anxiety, simply accepting anxiety actually loosens up the grip that anxiety has over you. But not accepting what's going on, it's like
get the paper bag now.
It's like tying an anchor to your leg and wonder why I'm falling deeper into the ocean. I'm like, well, the anchor's too much for you
and
to
we
swim.
all do it.
Yeah, that's how we learn. And the thing is this, eventually the anchor's going to hit the bottom of the ocean. And guess what? You can't go any further. And when you do, all of a sudden it's like, start floating up.
Yeah.
But once you start to go down, and literally allow yourself to go down, you actually start to enjoy the process of what you started out as anxiety, and you start to enjoy the process of transforming the anxiety into upward. It might not go to exhilaration, but it might go to a state of calmness.
Throw your rubber band thing in here, because that would be a perfect time for it.
Oh, with like the rubber band effect?
Well, just like you're floating down, you're going to float back up.
Yeah, exactly. So in science, it's called the rubber band effect. I'm sure there's a more technical,
scientific,
but it's like when you take something, you pull it back like a rubber band. And when you're pulling a rubber band, because of tension, that's the analogy of pulling into the dark. But the moment you're conscious of what you're doing, all you have to do is let go of the rubber band, and whatever it is you were pulling or holding on to will sling forth into the light at the rate in which it was pulled back.
Exactly. Much further than if you never had.
Yes.
But think about that.
But again,
no matter how far back you go or not, whatever you're making, we draw the boundaries in our head. But
so suffering like this, I'm suffering a lot. And once I let go of suffering, I seem to catapult myself further into light. Now, once I understand that, once you move into this aspect of light, you can then naturally just gravitate towards. You don't need to have the effect
you don't
of pulling
have to
back.
go back.
Yeah.
No.
It doesn't, like I was telling Mike, it's
That would be exhausting.
Yeah, it would. Like, and that's the roller coaster.
Yeah. Well, that's teenage years.
Someone's like, I felt great today. Well, what preceded? Oh, I got in a fight with my wife. And it's like,
family life.
And then it's like, I want to feel great tomorrow. Well, I better start a fight with my wife. I'm like, it's like, I don't know if you have another one of those in you. So you start a fight with your wife and you get up and you try to make up. And it's like, what are you doing? It's like, well, last week when we had a fight and we made up, I felt so great. So I figured if I get in a fight with you and make up, I'll feel good again. She's like, you're a moron.
Well, like that paints what we truly live in as a society. So the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Yeah. Why are you waking up, going to that job that you hate, eating the exact same meal, coming home watching the exact same comfort shows, and waking up to do it all over again, and not thinking you are not living in this dysfunctional reality? You are. That's why you feel your body is telling you, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm this. You are, because you're doing the same things over and over and expecting different results.
Now, the brilliant thing about this is, when you talked about the job and coming home and watching the same programs, but the brilliant thing about this is, you don't need to get up and change a job or even change what program you want. You have to change your perception to it. And that's what the show's about. So what will happen is, you'll change your perspective about your job. And it doesn't go from like, oh, it sucks, to like, oh, it's great. Like, don't fool yourself, but it's like, I don't like my job. And then ask yourself, is there anything I like about my job? Well, I like, Harry in the accounting department. He's a good friend of mine. We have talks. Oh, how do you feel? Now think about Harry and you talk. Oh, it feels good. All of a sudden, when it feels good, you're getting higher, then you can reach for other things. And what will happen, one or two things. You'll either realize, I love my job, it was my attitude towards it, and your dream job will show up. But your dream job will never show up as long as you hate your job, because the next job that shows up, even if you quit, you actually, wherever you go, there you are, and you'll find the same people in that office or whatever.
Okay, so I love how Frank just said this, because Frank helped me with this huge when
Mike actually helped himself, but
so like what he's describing. So most people, they understand that they're caught in this rut, but they're afraid, right, to quit their job or to. Guys, you don't have to quit anything. You don't have to stop watching the shows. And thank you so much for saying this, Frank, because this truly helped me. You don't have to change anything you're doing except the way you're looking at it.
Yep, perfectly said.
That is so powerful, guys, because it is scary. Like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go quit my job when I've got a family at home that I got to feed?
Yeah. And
like, I get it, guys. Yeah. Like, trust me, we're not saying that. Eventually, something will come into your life, and you'll have a much better job. You'll be making more money.
Absolutely.
And all of that.
That's
the natural progression of expansion. Correct. But I love that you said that, because that is truly the most important part. Is it is not quitting your job. It is not. If anything, that could bring you into a worse state. Because then you're in this frenzy. No. Begin to change the way you look at things, and everything changes.
Absolutely, instantly. Like I would always hear and these
Great. I'm glad you said that. That's so important. But that tied everything. That made it real.
Because I think that's what it is when people hear this stuff from a vantage point, like, you can do anything, it's like, yeah, but how do I get from here to there in this place in which, we live in a quantum world, and people are like, what the hell does that even mean? It's a very arbitrary thing. Mm-hmm. And it is. But it just means that what once took someone 6 weeks can take someone else 6 hours. That's all I mean by that. But know this, the one who did it in 6 hours didn't have any better experience than the one that took 6 weeks. That's the other thing I'm telling you. So when you so in other words, you don't like your job. I'm like, well, try tomorrow, go in there and just say to one person, hey, how was your day going? Strike up a conversation that you normally wouldn't do. And all of a sudden, the exchange gift you gave to another person in just simply noticing them will change your physiology. Like, oh, that felt good. Well, then do it to somebody else and do it every day and then start doing that. You have to become conscious of that, because subconsciously you just walked in with your head down and put your briefcase on the desk and started opening, and it's like, oh shit, here comes the boss. That's a subconscious program. But if you walked in there and said, hey, Sally, how was your weekend? And it was good. And Sally's a little distraught because she never heard you say it. Oh, good. All of a sudden you changed her and you changed yourself because you were conscious. You had to be conscious to say, I'm going to say hi to Sally today. And that consciousness literally changed the way you looked at your job in that moment. And if you remain conscious, all of a sudden ideas open up, information comes, and when you act on it, all of a sudden, bam, 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 you get into this state of flow.
This is truly the essence of it, guys, because this is so important, because you don't need to drastically change anything in order to accomplish, in order to release yourself of suffering and live in bliss and joy. It comes down to the way you are thinking about it. You are what you become what you think about. But what Frank is talking about right here is so crucial, because it's not the way you go in and do your job that's going to give you a raise. it's going to come to you in a way you could never imagine. You went out, you did this at your job, you were doing something, and the person's uncle happened to see you doing that because they were there eating lunch that day.
There's so many
and
scenarios,
they walk up
yeah.
to, it could be anything. These are the opportunities that will begin to unfold once you see opportunity. And again, you're not walking in looking for anything. It's go in and find that feeling. Look at it as, today is going to be a better day because...
I say so.
Yeah, because I deserve it.
And then what transpires is the gift. And what happens is when you...
This is the best part.
Yeah, when you elevate your state of like, this job sucks, so it's not that bad. What happens is, it's a frequency that the universe picks up. So what happens is, you have a thought that it's not that bad. And then what happens is your body, the thought is electrical impulse that goes out to the universe,
transceiver,
to the North Pole, like the children ask for a gift. And then the body, if it matches it's not that bad, going from this sucks, it actually illuminates up, becomes an electromagnetic field, like a magnet. The impulse sends it out, and then the magnet attracts back to it the occurrence of what you're about to experience.
And guys, this is so
And that's
real.
when the person notices, because that was the magnet. But when life sucks, that's when the boss walks over to you and gives you a pink slip.
And and these are what we call synchronicities.
Yes.
You'll hear
And
a
synchronicity
ton of
works in
terms,
both directions.
but it is the truth, and it's beautiful when it happens, and it's so unexpected, and it's the game's over. Then you realize, okay,
I want more of this.
Oh yeah, I get it, and you start playing with it. And what I mean by playing with it is you start to loosen up.
Like experiment.
Well, once you loosen up.
Yeah.
Game over, guys. This is when shit starts changing. Excuse my language. This is when it starts changing, and you really get into the flow of things. You will make leaps and bounds in your life.
You're thirsty for this process.
Leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
Things you thought would have been 10 years away, you will have by the end of that year.
Yeah, think about
like money, name it, whatever, guys. It all just flows.
Like you think about like a scientist, because scientists are like these adults that are like children. They're discovering something.
They really are.
And what's interesting is they tend to start out, not that they don't have an opinion, but they like to start out with a clean slate in a matter-of-fact type of way. But the second they discover something over and above the aspect of what was discovered before, they get all excited. And then like, oh my God, this opened up a whole new room. And it doesn't end. It's not like, oh, I discovered this. I am going to retire and write me off and make a poster of me and talk about me to the end of days. So I sit on the beach drinking a Mai Tai. No, it's impossible to do that because you would never want to retire from that process and continuous process. The second someone discovers something, the discovery is an awakening point to what you can do with it. Oh my God! And then you do that and it keeps multiplying and multiplying, expansion, expansion, expansion.
Well, as you elevate, you're like, wait a second, I'm thinking really small scale here. What's what's $5,000 extra, every year or whatever. Then it's like the game changes.
And when you get really good at it, you don't think about money.
No.
You think about the experience, and if money needs to show up in order to fulfill the experience based on the understanding and the cooperation of the exchange we have on this planet, it will show up in droves.
This is important, and I like to phrase things in the terms of money. It was an easy way for it to click for me personally.
Well, because most people focus on it. That's I think it was. This is actually what is the stranglehold on most people. Because I was talking about that to somebody. We were talking about a process of looking at expanding the business, and then the worry is like, well, if we do this, we're going to lose this amount of money. And I'm like, I've learned to never focus on money. Because when you focus on money, you learn on saving and cutting back.
And when you're in abundance, what the hell is
saving?
Expansion.
Next thing you know, I'm going to give everything away and just hold this pile of money and bury it in the ground. And there's a story out of the Bible with the master that had 3 servants, and he gave them all money. And they went forth, and one invested this way, one invested that way, and good job. And the other one said, I buried it. Why would you do that? He was like, well, if I buried it, I wouldn't spend it. He goes, it was meant to be invested and spent. You don't squander it. So what I say about, like, in other words, if you need to save and cut back to gain your breath to move forward, by all means. But we weren't meant to come here. We live in an abundant universe. We really do.
Absolutely.
So you don't think Bill Gates is like, hey, honey, we need to cut back on this. He's like, no, we need to expand this. Not out of the worldly satisfaction of having a new car or a bigger house. We need to expand this. In his case, is probably to get rid of malaria or polio, whatever project he's on somewhere in the world. And expansion is the only thing, not contraction. Expansion is where you find the answer to the solution or to the problem. You find it in the expansive side of it, not in the contractional side of it. You have to continually go beyond. You have to keep going higher to say, oh, that's why that road's blocked. I couldn't see it from down there, but now up here I can see it. Now I know how to get around it. Beautiful, it's brilliant. And all the way to do is to keep rising higher above the valley to see the road below. But if I'm tunneled underneath, I can't see anything. So a lot of people are trying to get to a point where, oh, I don't want to have any of this and that. I'm like, it's like, I don't want to have any experience so I'm not let down. I don't want to get into a relationship so I don't get yelled at. And I'm like, you know, go into it, protect yourself, but at the same time, it's about expansion. That's why we came here.
Well, when you begin to process, use these practices in daily life, the thing that normally will come up is fear. So recognize that just like the illusions that we're talking about, which is, you know, the third dimension, there is nothing to be afraid of. And we really need to cut fear out of our lives because it is a created...
Well, ask yourself, where does the fear come from in this situation?
Well, when you say come from, what do you mean?
So in a situation like this, we could sit here all night and talk about fear and what fear is. And I could show you different perspectives of it, right? So empirically, fear is not even an entity. But in this case, because you brought it up, and I like the way you brought it up because it just sparked something in my head. Fear is a belief that you can't do the very thing you want to do. That is it. Then ask yourself, why do I believe I can't do it? And you keep asking yourself, and then you start to make the belief more malleable, and then you put another door or window, whatever it is, an opening in it, and then you fit in there, and right when you do that, fear goes away automatically. Fear is nothing in that situation. Fear is nothing other than you have a belief that's disallowing you from your desire, which you came here to have. All right? Now, I'm not fear of jumping off a cliff and learning to fly, because that is not my desire. So I don't have fear around that. Like, if I was in the middle of the desert, I wouldn't necessarily have a fear of sharks, because there aren't any around. You know what I'm saying?
Out here in Arizona, we got a ton of shark problems.
Maybe some land sharks, you know, but it's something different.
Right.
But, so it wouldn't even be something considered. So when the fear that we're talking about is coming is, I want to do this, but some belief that enter into another program, maybe from somebody else, most likely, says you can't do that. Well, someone says you can't fly like a bird. I'm like, yeah, because I'm not. It has no emotional attachment to it. So there's no fear generating out of it. But once I have a belief, and we can't always have to honor our beliefs, you cannot just toss your belief out the window. I want to do this, but my belief says I can't. Fear comes in. And what is fear? Fear is telling me this belief isn't working. So fear now is my friend. It's my messenger to say, hey, what are you doing? Become conscious here. Don't go do it. Don't jump off the cliff just yet. But sit here with this belief. Look at this belief. Turn it. Oh, when I hold the belief this way, it is possible for me to start this business. All I did was take this thing, and by shifting it, perspective-wise, I transformed it. When I transformed it, this murky thing of fear that says I couldn't now showed me I can, and fear no longer exists.
And again, this analogy is you with that thought that you keep twisting around in your head and that pretzel you're making. So like what Frank is saying is when you're landing on stuff in your head, land on the one that looks up, land at the one that looks forward, land on the one that the attention is what you truly want or is preferential to you, because you can, because you're the one changing that.
Or when you do land on the one that's not preferential, ask yourself the question, what do I need to know or believe to say I can't do this? Why do I believe I can't do this? And keep asking the question. If you keep asking why, you'll say, I can't believe I can't do this because I don't have enough money. Why do you think you need more money? Or why don't you think you accumulate more money? And then you'll come up with another answer. The ego keeps going. Eventually you're going to tire out the ego. And eventually when you get to the point where, well, why don't I can't money? And then all of a sudden you say, I don't know. We just broke surface now. Because now you don't have an answer defeating you. And that's when the belief starts to transform. So even if you're pinned down by it, ask yourself, why do I believe this is true?
And great point, because guys, some trauma out there and some suffering is so severe. You know, certain people in certain circumstances, like real trauma, can have you to choked feeling, you know, pinned down, like Frank is saying. So if you are suicidal, if you have a form of depression or something like this where...
Well, all trauma is real, experienced.
But you know what I mean? Like,
no, that's what I'm saying.
I guess like I've never felt a level of like a trauma of like a rape survivor or something that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no.
So like that I can see as very like paralyzing. And like I want them to know it's just not as casual as, oh, flip it over and look at it. But
it can be, because I've learned these techniques from people that were at those traumas.
You're absolutely right, because again, me saying it can or cannot be, it will be either way.
No, that's why. Yeah. But that's why when I said earlier, guess, like, always honor your belief.
I guess my internal belief then is that there's maybe trauma that I haven't experienced.
Well, it could
that
be.
Seems so heavy.
But I guess like what I
sorry, went off on
no, what I feel Mike is getting at is we're just showing a different perspectives. We are no by any means telling someone that had a traumatic experience that get over it.
That's no, absolutely what I don't want people to think. Because a traumatic experience
in itself is a process, it is an experience, and it's to honor. So it's what it is. So we're not telling people that have this to get over it. Like in other words, I have enough information to sit in front of a bunch of people at AA and explain stuff. But because I myself never experienced what is known to be an alcoholic, I wouldn't be suited for that. I wouldn't be believable for that. So I would never comfort somebody in that. We're talking in perspective in all things. No matter what you went through, there is a way out. Sometimes if you were raped or whatever, find somebody that got over it, and that will find comfort. That will be your modality. All right? Not be telling you to go breathe and get ice water or Wim Hof.
Very well said.
It might be something else.
Very well said.
You know, and it's what happens is we look at someone like, oh, I can relate to that person, and you know, maybe because like Wim Hof is talking about doing extreme things in the physical thing, which I like to do with my physical body. That's why I'm relating to him. Somebody else might go to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, meditate for 3 hours, and somebody might relate to that. Well, they're both right, but I'm drawn to my preference, and I know. And then I'll go from there to that. I might end up on top of Mount Kilimanjaro, meditating too. I don't know. But right now, I'm being drawn to this person, so I'm not looking for something better. This is it. If it was something better, it would be there. But right now, this is presented to me. And that's knowing the difference, because people are like, what's the best modality? I'm like, that's not the right question.
Yeah. That's not, there's...
The best modality will show up for you. Me and Mike are talking about all modalities and how they function at the root level. And how they function at the root level is the consciousness we give to it, but not the modality. But in order to have consciousness give to it, you need the modality. So we're not writing off the modality as it's not needed. It is very well needed.
Absolutely. And so when we say modality, or when we say permission slip, what we mean is you utilizing something to achieve focus, presence,
Exactly.
consciousness.
And then that's when you start to see information coming from your higher self, from internal, all these infinite sources, and then you find like what direction you go in and stuff like that. And that's how it begins.
Absolutely. And so you say,
that's actually when the journey begins.
Well, one of the people at home will say, okay, so how do I know which voice to listen to?
Oh, you'll know.
You'll know. Not only that, but remember, your subconscious only knows what it already knows. So if something is coming to you that you is an idea, that cannot be your ego or your subconscious. That is your higher self.
Yeah, Mike, you brought up a good point. The question is, how do I know if what's coming to me, impulse, is good or bad?
Yeah.
In the beginning, anxiety can seem like excitement. So you might act out of the anxiety and it doesn't work out. And as you get better at your conscious state of your body, you'll be able to recognize anxiety and excitement. Because it's the same energy field. So early on, the anxiety can seem like excitement and you might act on it and then like, I didn't work out. And then you start to realize, was I excited or was I filled with anxiety? There's a difference. And what's the difference between anxiety and excitement? Excitement is, whether or not I do that, it doesn't matter anymore. That's how you know it's excitement. Anxiety is saying, I must do that to achieve. Like, in other words, when you get into such a state of feeling, you feel good, and then it's giving you an impulse to go do something, and the thought before going to it is, you know what? Whether or not I do it, it doesn't matter. The feeling is what I was looking for. That's how you know it's excitement, and then you go forth, and then you experience it through a different field than just the excitement. And then you actually play it out.
Because these are the questions I remember asking myself.
Yeah.
So I'd like to, dive into like, okay, so I remember being like, all right, well, which feeling is it? And it's like, trust me, you know though.
As you become more familiar with it, you'll know.
You just, again, meditation in Tibet, becoming familiar with. That's what we're taught. Focus.
Meditation just means becoming familiar with it.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is literally learning your body. And self-regulation again, that's what we're doing, self-regulating. But that is a huge fact that I just wanted to make sure we jumped into. Is like, okay, so if I have something come to me and it's never come to me before, it can't be my subconscious. It can't be the ego. The ego is that it only knows what it's been programmed to know. So that's how you know, maybe I need to act on this impulse. Maybe I want to look into that. Yeah. So chase and fall. You'll learn what you want to chase and what amazing roads are opening up or opportunities are opening up for you, because it's something that is not familiar. And that's why it's fun.
You know what's interesting? As I've done this work, so to speak, or developed an understanding, because I'm even getting away from saying it's work. It's about a new understanding through the aspect of experience. A lot of times, I'll get an impulse to go do something, and in the midst of doing it, I get a tinge, because I have a belief that says I can't do it. And then, knowing what's going on, I quickly transform that belief and I go forth. And what's funny is, sometimes I never go to the complete fruition of the impulse, because something that was like, I almost say like my higher self dangled this carrot out to expose this belief, and knowing I had the ability to transform the belief, because there was a bigger carrot over there and I couldn't have gone to it, and then I saw that and so, I want to go for this other experience. Sometimes that happens, and I find that amazing, because once I get there, this was just to get over a belief so you can then see that thing over there, which I could have never saw. And the reason is the higher self says, that's too far for him to see, but this isn't. And that can alter the belief in order for him then to see there and where I really want to go. And it's like, wow, who the hell saw that coming? And that's the shock and the surprise. That's like the 6-year-old waking up on Christmas, seeing the big red box and not knowing what's in it, is the feeling I get when that happens. But I know what's in it is going to be good because it's a big red box, baby.
Okay, so I love this because I remember this is how you described that exact same scenario to me one time, and I loved it, and it really stuck with me. So like what you were just talking about, I remember I came and we were chatting once and we were talking about, I forgot what it was, but it was an experience in a non-preferential experience, in my opinion, and how we were taking that in a way where, well, hold up, why would that be non-preferential? Are you looking at the experience in the right way in order to use this as a platform to elevate to that next level? Mm-hmm. And I love that because it's true. When we have this anxious feeling come on, why are we labeling it as anxious? Why don't we label it as, let's just say, growth or elevation?
Yeah.
And that naturally changes the perception to elevate. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's perception, yeah.
But like, so when you feel that feeling of angst come on, recognize it and assign a different meaning to it. Okay, this is me getting out of my comfort zone. Yeah. That sounds a lot better than I'm anxious. Yeah. I'm getting out of my comfort zone. Watch the growth and watch how less you feel that next time that you get into a similar situation or that situation again.
Yeah, and notice different levels here, because we've talked about preference and non-preference. So we always tell people, move in the direction of your preference. So before preference, at another level, is what we call good and bad. So one day me and Mike were talking good and bad. I'm like, well, let's use preference, non-preference. There's another level.
Well, hold on, explain why. Because there's no such thing as good or bad. And that's very important to remember. Shakespeare said it best.
Yeah, it's a connotation. So there is a connotation. When someone says bad, like, hey, how's that restaurant over there? It's bad. Oh, I'm going to go check it out. Now, if someone says, how's that restaurant over there? I said, well, I don't prefer it. They're like, well, why don't you prefer it? There's still a consideration to go there. I don't prefer it because I don't like Italian food. Well, I like Italian food. I'm going to go. But once I say it's bad, you lost me. It's gone because of the connotation we gave bad and good. So we move from good and bad, preference, non-preference. Then the next place is it's all preferential. There isn't a non-preference. Because when I get really good at this, I would never be placed in a non-preference. Now, my misunderstanding of how things should be is what created the non-preference. But I don't know enough to move into the unknown to know what's supposed to happen because it's the unknown. So how do I know it's not preferential in order to keep excelling me if that's what I want? So what is preferential and non-preferential? It's slowing down the expansion. That's all it is. When you want to speed it up, it's all preferential, even if it's cold outside.
That's a really good way to say that.
And then you just learn to, okay.
I like this. You're saying, no, you're speeding up and slowing down your preferences.
That's all you're doing. So when I'm like this, I prefer this, and I prefer, you're just slowing up the expansion. You're not stopping it. Yeah. You're just slowing up. But if you really want to speed it up, and no one says you have to.
That's awesome.
So there's days where I'm like, there are days where I'm like, I'm going to do my preferential workout today. Okay. And then there are days where it's like, whatever happens, I'm going to prefer. All right? And then there's days like, oh, I didn't prefer that at all. Right? And it was my state of mind, my perception. It really wasn't the outside world.
Well, it never is.
No, it never is.
Yeah.
It's how I looked at it. And then, but sometimes it's like, yeah, I didn't prefer that. There's nothing wrong with that. But as I get really good at that, I'm like, that was interesting.
Well, hold on. So one thing I want to throw in here. So when you start getting good at this, and especially when I'm with Frank and we're flowing, the energy is sky high, you can feel it. That same thing, when you're in and around people, let's say at a lower vibration, somebody who doesn't understand these concepts, or at a different frequency. Yeah, there we go, different frequency. it isn't as, I don't want to say easy, but it is more work to get it. Like, I love doing these talks with Frank. I love coming in and having this back and forth because it elevates my frequency, and I know it elevates Frank's.
But all right, so you said it right there. So check this out. Just you driving here, you already put yourself into the state where the information
Absolutely.
Was. So you may give the excuse of coming to see me.
Again.
But the thing is, like, that's just a permission
slip. The illusion we live
I had nothing to do
so
with it.
True.
But
it's so true.
Yeah,
and again, back to the beginning.
I had
the
nothing
modality.
To do with it. Yeah.
This is our modality.
That's it. And so when we do it, the excitement preceded
right.
the conversation. And I was talking to someone today about that. Like,
but it's very important because they'll feel thrown off if they're around people with low vibration. Why isn't this working?
Because
you're
prepare yourself.
reacting to their vibration, and you're not responding. So this is a layer by layer thing, and as you get better, you'll be just fine around these people. But at first, it is overwhelming.
Yeah, in the three-dimensional, one of time, fourth dimension we're in, it's what we're doing is we're talking about is it's best to prepare yourself before doing. A lot of people will, like, you know, I used to do this. I would go to the gym and work out, and I knew within 10 to 20 minutes I would wake up and my energy field would work. And so I go there. But now I'm like, I already get there before I even do my first workout. And so I, like, where I was enjoying, like, I finally woke up. So some days it took 5 minutes, some days it took 10 minutes, some days it took 20 minutes. Some days I never got there. But I never step into the gym anymore until I get there, and then the gym becomes the playground, not the thing to get me feeling good. I no longer, the gym isn't to make me feel good, the gym is the expression of my feeling physically good. Mike got himself prepared, I got myself prepared. This conversation is nothing but the expression of our preparation. So, here you go, what Mike said. When I'm walking into something, prepare yourself, because even if the devil shows up, it's just a cartoon character.
Yes.
But if you walk in nilly, you're going to get sucked into whatever.
Absolutely.
So when I wake up and I go into the ice water, I prepare myself. I don't just jump in, I'll have a heart attack.
But this is important when you're getting into it.
Prepare yourself first, then enter in. How do you prepare yourself? Know that the water is my friend.
Well,
know that this friend
you
is
just
going to
nailed
teach me
it.
something.
No, you just nailed it.
Know
so
that the devil's telling me something.
That right there is how you will forever grow.
Yeah.
Is knowing that, okay, you already have this, and you uncover this throughout times in your life when you experience flow. So we're not talking about this elusive bliss that you've never exist. No, or that you're working towards. No, you have this now. You are this now. And so when you can remind yourself of this, and when you catch yourself in it, it's like a constant nice reminder, like Frank just said, of, hey, I'm good. Because you've always been good. You can only be good.
This is as functional down to the modality which you talk about, which a soldier utilizes to get on the battlefield.
Hell yeah.
A soldier doesn't roll out of bed and just wander onto the battlefield. It prepares, puts its armor on, makes sure it's got... So once the soldier steps onto the battlefield, they're conscious as hell. They're ready for it. That I'm talking about, you can use this in any area of your life.
Applicable in any
It's
scenario.
not about getting to the place where you're on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro meditating. You're like, oh, like we didn't come here for that. Although that's a rest point. I'm not saying don't do that. We came here to interact with the actual physical world.
And it's great that you said this, because so when I truly understood and knew and felt these concepts, it was a type of thing where you look at everything in your life differently from then on out. You cannot, and that's the biggest thing. But you begin to not only appreciate, etc., but there's just no way of looking at things ever again. So this is not something that is lost. It's just something that you continuously are finding, and that's
continuously expansion. To the expansion is new experience.
Absolutely, and there's no end, and that becomes something that's exciting.
That's
because
why
you wouldn't want there to be a finite.
Yeah, it's like when you have the horse in front of the carriage, this will never end is exciting. But when you have the carriage in front of the horse, this will never end. It's dreadful.
And I know
it's very dreadful because it's cumbersome. We're talking about you don't want this to end, just like a kid at the playground in summer. They don't want it to end. And because they don't want it to end, they're gifted the energy to withstand it. The kid hasn't had a snack in 3 hours, it's still running, right? Most adults are like, hey, I gotta eat. I'm like, you were sitting around all day. Like, hey, I'm losing my energy. I'm like, what's losing your energy is not allowing the expansion of the natural accordance of your body, of your experience. That will suck your energy. Burying money doesn't grow money. Investing money grows money. So if you're not doing something with the energy field, you're squandering it.
I think it's also important that we touch on just quickly the fact of the patterns that we have in our mind, brain, whatever you want to call it, and recognizing that when we get these feelings that come, those are a pattern that is simply a feeling that we have had in the past and we associate it with a certain experience. And we put a bad or good connotation on it. So when you understand that bad and good no longer exist, and it's what you make of it.
Well, it can exist if you believe it exists.
Absolutely.
It's an experience.
Yeah. But like these patterns in your head, when you recognize them for what they are, that's what's going to allow you to make the choice to change the pattern. And it's when you start to, I know Frank and I are both fans of listening to things when we exercise or, start our days when we go for a walk. Like other people's talk about whatever, podcasts or,
whatever jumps
classic,
at you.
Whatever, classic, speakers, whatever. Through those experiences, that is a pattern in my head that I've personally changed and allowed myself to grow and flourish from. But if you have a negative pattern in your head running all day, that's going to hold you back physically.
Yeah, actually, so the pattern.
I just want to go back to the super basics.
Yeah. So the pattern you talk about, we don't change the pattern. What we change is the frequency, and the pattern then changes. So like if you took sand, you've probably seen this before, they took sand or some type of filings on a flat sheet of metal, and they hook probes to it, and they send electrical impulses in, right? A frequency. All of a sudden, it creates a pattern.
I think I meant...
No,
I
know
think
I'm
talking thought then. Yeah. Because what I'm talking about is...
You
have to change... You get
when you have a thought,
when you start to recognize a thought is no longer your thought, and
but then it generates a new pattern, a new feeling, which then actually creates the whole new pattern in which you follow.
I do want to clarify that because I see
so
what you're saying is
the thought will generate a feeling. The feeling then generates the pattern. So it's not our job to change the pattern. It's our job to have a new thought that generates a new feeling, and then the pattern is naturally changed, and then we follow the pattern.
No, I see what you're saying, but I guess what I mean is we have thought patterns that run in our head, and so like when we create these thoughts, when we unconsciously don't understand.
Well, this thought will create this pattern,
and so
if
we
you
need
feel
to recognize it.
Yeah, and if I don't, so I can take this thought.
So when you say like pattern, you mean like a habit?
Yeah, a pattern's almost like a roadway. So if you actually took sand and put it on a thing and you did it, it would create these geometric patterns. So if I hit a certain frequency, like 528, it would show a frequency pattern. As long as I say to 528, that pattern will not change. So wherever there's movement, say my life is to go this way, all right? So in order to change a pattern, the frequency has to change, so therefore I can go a different way through the pattern. So what's a frequency? A thought comes in, the way I feel about the thought is the frequency setting, and then the pattern changes. And then once the pattern is there, I follow the pattern. And then what I do is I perpetuate the feeling. Boom, 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 boom. That's how it goes. So at any moment when I get bored or this pattern no longer becomes useful, by grabbing another thought, generating another feeling, I generate a whole new pattern and I follow. It's like a new map, right? And that's, so when you look at that physical thing that's on how it looks, every time the frequency changes, I have a whole new structure I'm walking through. Ooh, look at that one. Let me walk to this one. As long as
you elevate your frequency.
As long as I maintain that frequency, this is my pattern. Then there's nothing wrong with that frequency.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
Because that can change
the
lower the vibration.
And even if it's a low
frequency.
vibration, it isn't bad. But what happens is, even this vibration of 528 and walking through that, eventually I'm going to get bored of. Because when you look at these patterns, sometimes it looks like a maze, a discovery or something. And if you actually picture yourself walking through the parts that are open, right? That's a thought that pops in my head.
That's
that'd be a
honestly
good maze to
true.
walk through. But then once the frequency changes, a whole new maze. But after I conquer this maze, so to speak, experience it to its fullest and how I deem the fullest, I then want to change that knob and frequency. And then it's the unknown. It's the new unknown pattern comes. I'm like, oh, let's go into this one.
It's kind of like, all right, dive into this one.
Yeah. You know, so what frequency is the best frequency? I'm like, again, that's the wrong question to be asking. What are you feeling? And the elevation of like, oh my God, the pattern will be created, and then the pattern is what actually helps us perpetuate the physical things. So the synchronicities within the pattern, the people show up, the instances, I'm like, oh my God, they start recognizing it. And that's synchronicity. That is given to us. We don't create it. What we create is the consciousness and the feeling to recognize the pattern that I enjoy. Because why do I enjoy it? It's a new experience. And that is the perspective shift.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That was good. Okay.
Yo, Frank.
I think
we had some really good